Hello and welcome to another professional development training on Moodle. This time importing Publisher Testbanks into Moodle using Nash Community College's XML Builder, or using the GIFT format if you don't have access to the XML Builder or to a Publisher's Testbank. Now in the first part of this presentation we'll discuss the XML Builder from Nash Community College. Once we get that behind us, we'll talk about how to use the GIFT format. When it comes to the Nash utility, there are 4 easy steps that we have to take, plus potentially one more. We're going to go through each of these steps in turn, but just so you kind of see it in your mind, first we have to create or copy over the database in a form that we can use it, then export that from the Testbank, use the utility to convert it to an XML, import that into Moodle, and then once it's in Moodle, we either have an existing quiz ready to go, or we have a test bank that allows us to pick and choose questions to create a quiz within Moodle. So let's get started with the first step, creating or copying the Publisher's Testbank. Now this particular utility will work with pretty much any of the standard software the publishers put out. TestGen, ExamView, EasyTest, you name it. As long as they export to something like a Blackboard, you're okay. You need to have access to the ancillaries, and by that I mean have your own version of the software and your own version of the Testbank in order for you to be able to move forward and get these things done. Now a couple of key thoughts here when it comes to terminology. When I'm using Testbank here, and as they use it in the utility, they really mean the created test, whatever it is that you're exporting out of the Testbank. What I really want you to do, however, is to take the entire chapter's worth of questions and make that your test. If you do that, you really are creating a test bank because you're going to be able to take the entire Publisher's Testbank and export it into Moodle where you can pick and choose questions as you like. You don't have to. If you'd rather go a little quicker and have a little less utility, you can simply create a quiz or a test inside these publisher software tools and then export that simple quiz or test. The problem is then you don't have access to the other questions. You'd have to do this each time you create a new test. Now, depending on the software, once you go through and select the questions you need, you may have to tell it that you're going to use it for an online or web test format. You're not creating paper tests, you're creating digital tests. So as long as you have the correct format, you're fine. We're not going to cover how to use each individual publisher's software. The publishers do a good job of teaching you that themselves. But instead, I'm going to assume that you are able to take an entire chapter of questions and have copied those over into your web-based test, and you've saved that test. Now, once you do that, you're normally able to export that file, and that's what step 2 is. When you're exporting the file, you want to export it in the format of Blackboard 6+. If you have a higher version of Blackboard, you can use that as well, but I would recommend using Blackboard 6, fairly much an industry standard, and it seems to work no matter how you play with it. Once you have this particular file created, save it where you can find it again. I strongly suggest that you create names that make sense to you when you look these up later on. So, for instance, you see an example there, Stretch, 5th edition, Chapter 5, multiple choice questions. If the textbook was written by Stretch, that makes perfect sense. You may also want to put in the course numbers, so maybe that would be Net 205, Smith, 5th edition, Chapter 2. Come up with a consistent naming format, and your life will be far easier downstream. Okay, so you've taken and selected an entire chapter's worth of questions inside the publisher's software. You've saved it. You've now exported it as a Blackboard 6 point whatever. And you're going to take that file, and now, courtesy of Nash Community College, you're going to convert it into an XML file that Moodle can pick up quite quickly. In order to do that, you open up the utility. You've got the URL here. It's a very simple utility to load. Once you have it, you'll have an icon on your desktop. You can double-click, and it opens up this window. There's really not much of an interface with this software. All you have to do is, you see on the left-hand side, in the test generator, find the format you exported your test into. Notice they're giving you both the publisher version of the software and the export format. So if I've used something from Pearson, which uses the TestGen software, then I would select TestGen export into Blackboard 6.x to 9.x. If you were using a different software, you would pick the correct one there. Once you've told the software what the formats are, then go to the file chooser, and you can click on the little icon of an open file. It does take a while to load in the interface to give you the files available. Select the file, it'll populate that text blank. It will also then give you automatically the Moodle XML output file you see down below. If you have to, go ahead and make changes there. That's all you have to do in terms of setup. Then simply click the button that's marked ST ... Supposed to be start, but the button sizes were too small, so it's just the ST button. Click that, and within a few seconds, bang, you're done. You now have an XML file that you can quickly upload into Moodle. So let's do that. The final step then is to take this compressed folder, this XML file, and to upload it into Moodle. So open up your Moodle instance, go to your class, find in the admin menu the questions area. This will be one of those vertical columns of all the options that you have to look at. Click open questions, and then use the edit questions page and import. Once you do that, it'll give you a file selection option. Import the file using the Moodle XML format. Make sure you tell the machine that's what you're doing. Leave all the defaults the way they are. Choose file upload. Boom, it's done. It will give you a very quick screen that lists the first line of all of the various questions that you put in. It'll tell you how many questions made it through successfully and of what format, and you're done. They're now available. You'll also notice the category of the questions will be listed based on what the publisher had. So it'll say things like Chapter 2 or Chapter 3, whatever it may be. That's why I recommend doing this one chapter at a time. Don't try to take the entire textbook all at once. It just gets muddy. Just grab each chapter, turn it into a test, then turn it into a Blackboard activity, and then turn it into an XML, and then load it into your Moodle. Now that works really well for most things in terms of bringing over essay questions, fill-in-the-blank questions, multiple choice questions, matching questions, no problem. But if you have graphics, they probably will not directly show up on the quiz. You have to manually link them. The graphics will be brought over, but they're brought over in a separate section and they're not automatically linked to the questions. I'm not going to cover that today because Moodle Docs does cover that quite well if you have that as an issue in your class, and honestly, most people don't. If you have a math class and you have a lot of complex formulae, you may have to go in and modify those a little bit with the formula editor. But if it's pure text, this particular technique works beautifully, and I strongly encourage you to give it a try. If you get lost, look at some of the resources we have on the Moodle site for this class, and you'll see that it is a fairly straightforward process. So for the most part, this little utility saves you tons of time. You don't have the spelling errors, the typing errors. You don't have to worry about making mistakes as you're moving keys around and doing all the other things that causes difficulty when we type up our own tests. The nice part about grabbing an entire chapter and bringing over the textbook chapter by chapter as if they were tests, and therefore creating your own test bank in Moodle, is it gives you much more flexibility. So if you're afraid that a test was compromised and somehow the answers have gotten out, then you can go in and simply change some of the questions out and relaunch in just a few minutes without any problem. So I really recommend that you give this a try. So let's shift gears for a moment. Let's say you're creating your own tests, you're writing your own quizzes from scratch, your own questions from scratch, and you don't have a test bank available. Then what do? Are you stuck? Is it going to be a matter of having to cut and paste inside the actual quiz function of Moodle, or is there something else we can do? Well, there actually is something you can do that works fairly well. Again, primarily text-based. If you have images, you can fix them in much the same way that we discussed briefly with the NASH, where you can upload the image and then link the image to the question. But again, that's an issue that's very rare, and we'll cover that one-on-one if there's a problem. Well, the first thing you have to do is open up a text editor. You can do this in Word, but I really don't recommend it. Word tends to add too many bells and whistles that can mess this format up. So instead, use Notepad or a free utility like Notepad++ so that you can get in and very quickly get to just the text. You do want to save this in a UTF-8 format so that you avoid having any extra characters that may mess up the transcription of the questions. The basic format for a question, and here you see the link for the full details on how to get to the GIF format, starting off with 2 slashes. This is a one-line only comment, meaning it can go to the end of the line, but after that, if it wraps around, then it actually becomes a second line and you have to have another set of slashes. Comments are helpful, but they're not required. So you might want to put comments in like this is chapter 4 or this is a special question, whatever it may be. Totally optional. You do not have to use these. The next line, line 2 here, you see a double set of colons. The first double set of colons is the question title, and here you see Q3 as the question title. Again, this is optional. If you leave this out, then the first line of your question will become the question title. The problem is it's difficult to see and understand when you're using the Moodle tools to see the questions because the title is simply too long. So something simple like Q123 for question 123 works really well. The second set of double colons marks the stem of the question. Everything from that second set of double colons through the open curly brace is the stem of the question itself, if you will. It can go through multiple lines. It doesn't have to be one line like the comments. And again, if you've left off the title, it's the only set then of double colons to the open curly brace. Then you have to put down the various answers and distractors. The correct answer goes first with an equal sign in front. That lets the machine know that that is in fact the correct answer. Behind each question, if you so desire, you can give specific feedback for that response. And those are indicated by the number signs. When you see the number sign underneath red, white, and blue, that's what will appear in Moodle if the individual selects that particular response and then goes back and reviews their quiz. Incorrect answers, the distractors, are indicated by the tildes, the little curlies. Again, behind each of those, if you wish, you can put any kind of comment using the number sign. The number sign relates to the line right above it. This is really helpful if you want to give students a particular page number to go back and refer to the data. It also then tends to reduce the number of questions people have about your quiz if they have the ability to go look up the correct answers themselves. Then you use the closed curly brace on a line of its own to indicate that that question is complete. Then have one blank line between each of the questions, and you're done. So that's the basic format for a multiple choice question. Now that's not the only type of question we can have using the gift formula. Let's kind of briefly look at some of the other options that we can explore. Here are some of the other types of questions you can use. True-false is fairly straightforward. Again, the double colon indicating the question title, the second double colon giving the narrative of what the question is going to be, and then within the curly braces on the same line, the value. Is this a true or is this a false response? What's the correct answer? You can also use specific feedback for right or wrong answers when it comes to the multiple choice. We just gave you an example of that earlier, but here you see it as a single line. So it doesn't have to be broken into one line per response, although it is a little bit easier to read that way. You also have the potential of doing fill in the blank, and you'll notice here there are two different responses, either of which would work. The word to, TWO, or the numeral to would work in terms of being a correct answer inside this fill in the blank question. Matching questions are a little more complex. Here you have the question stem, as we've seen before, and then within the curly braces you have the line items that match. The cat, as you see, the little sort of generic arrow pointing to cat food, the dog with a generic arrow pointing to dog food. You need to at least match every one of the responses to an answer and then give other answers if possible to have more distractors. You can even have a question such as the math range question that allows multiple answers over a range of responses. And there's really two different ways to do that. This one's fairly straightforward. You can see that there's three different numbers starting at 2. So it'd be 2, 3, and 4 are the answers. That's indicated by numeral 3, colon 2. And here you see another means of saying the exact same thing, only now it says, all right, pick a number between 1 and 5 inside that response set. As you can see from the note, it's the same question, but you can't enter it this way through the Moodle interface itself. You have to use the gift format if you want it to appear this way. A fairly complex one, as you see here, the multiple numeric answers with partial credit and feedback. You can read that on your own. If you're going to do something that intense, I strongly recommend you use our link for gift format and try to make sure that you follow it exactly, because just getting one character wrong here can mess it up. The essay question, fairly simple. You simply have the question title and the question stem itself, and then an open space for the essay response. That's about it for our quick flyby over the Nash XML Builder and the gift format. Different ways you can enter quizzes into Moodle without having to manually type them or cut and paste them into the Moodle interface. The thing to remember is if you already have Publisher's software, the best thing to use in terms of speed and accuracy is that free Nash XML Builder. I strongly suggest you give that a try. On the other hand, if you're stuck writing your own questions, then you are going to have to use the gift format. It is kind of a pain the first time you use it, but once you get used to the rhythm and see how the format works, it's actually quite simple and a lot quicker than doing the cut and paste into Moodle itself. No matter what you decide to do, whether it's using XML, the gift format, or manually putting the stuff into Moodle one line at a time, always make sure that you then go back through and preview your quizzes before you give them to your students to make sure that your keys are correct. Everybody makes mistakes, and the best time to find that out is before all of your students have taken the quiz. Well, thanks for spending some more time with us, and we hope you found this useful, and we'll see you again in our next training.